Benjamin Harris had recently been named CEO of Brightview Solutions, a major tech company that was growing faster than anyone had imagined. But Benjamin had one goal before taking the helm officially. He wanted to understand what kind of culture existed among his managers, the people who were supposed to uphold the values and vision of the company. He was no stranger to adversity. He knew all too well how prejudice and ignorance could hide behind polite smiles and business suits. But he wanted to see it for himself. And so, he created a plan. He would come to the headquarters not as the CEO, but as a job applicant. Not only that, he would come disguised in a wheelchair, playing the part of someone seeking a junior data analyst position. He wanted to see the raw, unfiltered behavior of the people in charge of hiring, the very face of Brightview Solutions. Brightview's headquarters was buzzing that day. It was the company's quarterly hiring day, and the lobby was full of hopeful applicants clutching resumes and rehearsing answers to potential questions. Benjamin made his way in quietly, his wheelchair rolling slowly across the gleaming floor. Nobody seemed to notice him as he wheeled himself to the line of waiting applicants. He looked around, observing the faces of the HR team members scattered around the lobby, chatting and laughing amongst themselves. "Mr. Harris?" he heard his name called. But this wasn't his real name. Today, he was going by the name of Larry Simmons, just another candidate. The HR manager assigned to oversee this round of interviews was standing there, clipboard in hand, and a bored expression on her face. Her name was Cheryl Dixon, a tall, thin woman in her mid-30s with sharp eyes that seemed to assess people quickly, often with a hint of judgment. She spotted Benjamin in his wheelchair and raised an eyebrow, looking him over with a look that wasn't quite friendly. "You're Mr. Simmons?" Cheryl asked, barely masking her surprise. Benjamin nodded, his gaze calm and polite. He extended his hand, but she made no move to shake it. She simply looked at his hand and then at him, a faint smirk playing on her lips. "You're here for the data analyst position?" she asked slowly, as if he hadn't read the job title on the door. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, undeterred by her reaction. "I'm here for the interview." She looked down at his wheelchair and then back at him with an almost dismissive laugh. "You're joking, right?" Cheryl said, loud enough for some of the other candidates to look over, a few chuckling uncomfortably. "I mean, a data analyst? Do you even know what that entails?" Benjamin didn't flinch. He simply nodded again. "Yes, ma'am. I have the necessary skills and experience." "Oh, do you now?" Cheryl continued, her tone sharper. "You see, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Brightview Solutions isn't. Well, it's not exactly a place for people with limitations." She punctuated the word limitations with a sour smile, as if she'd done him a favor by being so direct. "We need people who can keep up, understand? People who can handle the demands of a fast-paced environment." The other candidates looked away, some whispering to each other, others clearly uncomfortable with Cheryl's words. But Cheryl didn't seem to notice. She continued with her thinly veiled insults, taking aim at Benjamin's presumed lack of ability. She made assumptions based on his appearance, tossing out comments that dripped with condescension. Benjamin listened, his expression unreadable. He made a mental note of her behavior, every word she said, every snide glance she threw his way. Inside, he felt the weight of her ignorance, but he remained calm, determined to see this through. "Let's not waste anyone's time here," Cheryl finally said, a sneer on her face. "Why don't you just head on out? Maybe this job isn't for you." Benjamin took a deep breath. He looked around, making eye contact with the other HR team members nearby. They looked away, pretending not to see what was happening. No one came to his aid. No one stopped Cheryl from her hurtful remarks. With a polite nod, Benjamin turned his wheelchair away from Cheryl and headed toward the door. But he had no intention of leaving. He had seen enough and learned more than he had hoped. Now he was ready to act. As he rolled toward the exit, a faint smile crossed his face. This was only the beginning. Benjamin sat in his office later that afternoon, dressed as himself this time, no wheelchair, no Larry Simmons. The interview ordeal from earlier still echoed in his mind, especially Cheryl's dismissive words and the way her colleagues had turned a blind eye. He thought about how such behavior might affect others, perhaps people who didn't have the power he had to address it. Today, Brightview Solutions had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. He smiled to himself, knowing that Cheryl and the others had no idea what was coming. His assistant, Jake, knocked on the door and entered. "Ready for the staff introduction, sir?" Jake asked with a grin. The entire company had been waiting eagerly to meet their new CEO, though none of them expected him to look anything like Larry Simmons. "Perfect timing, Jake," Benjamin replied, standing up. "Let's go introduce me to everyone." The event was scheduled in the main auditorium, with employees filling the rows of seats and whispering with excitement. Cheryl and the HR team sat near the front, alongside the other department heads. None of them had a clue that the very man Cheryl had insulted and turned away was about to walk on stage as their new boss. The founder and former CEO, a man named David, took the stage and approached the podium, clearing his throat. David had built Brightview Solutions from the ground up and was well respected by his team. Today, he was there to welcome his brother to the role, someone he trusted to carry on the company's values. "Ladies and gentlemen," David began, "thank you for being here to welcome the new CEO of Brightview Solutions. This is a leader who believes in people and their potential and someone who values fairness and integrity above all." Cheryl adjusted her seat, eyeing the stage with mild curiosity. She seemed more interested in the appearance and background of the new CEO than his character or values. Her smug look hadn't faded since her interview with Larry Simmons earlier, and she kept glancing around, expecting to see someone from her own league, a tall, polished, and charismatic executive. She even imagined he'd laugh at her interview story, dismissing it as just a way to weed out the unfit. David continued, "Please welcome my brother and the new CEO of Brightview Solutions, Benjamin Harris." The auditorium filled with applause as Benjamin stepped onto the stage, his steady gaze sweeping over the audience. When Cheryl saw him, her face dropped in an instant. Her eyes widened in shock as she recognized him immediately. Her lips parted, but no words came out. He wasn't Larry Simmons in a wheelchair anymore. He was Benjamin Harris, dressed in a sharp suit, carrying himself with authority and dignity. He didn't need to raise his voice to command respect. His mere presence on the stage did that. He nodded at his brother and took the podium, glancing at Cheryl with a calm expression. "Thank you all for the warm welcome," he began, his voice carrying easily over the silent crowd. "I'm truly honored to join Brightview Solutions and work alongside all of you. Today, I want to talk about the principles this company was founded on and what we stand for: respect, inclusivity, and integrity." He paused, letting his words sink in. Cheryl sat stiffly, her hands clenched in her lap as if she wanted to disappear. He hadn't looked away from her since he'd started speaking, and the weight of his gaze was unmissable. Earlier today, Benjamin continued, I had the opportunity to experience our hiring process firsthand. You see, I came here as a candidate, as a person seeking an opportunity. I wanted to see if Brightview was the place I hoped it would be, a place where people are given a chance based on their skills, not based on their appearance or physical abilities. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd as realization dawned on some of the employees. Cheryl's colleagues exchanged nervous glances, feeling uneasy as they realized what he was implying. Benjamin's gaze grew more intense. To my disappointment, I was met with assumptions, dismissiveness, and even outright prejudice. And all this from someone I had hoped would represent the best of Brightview's values. Cheryl squirmed in her seat, her face flushed and her eyes fixed on the floor. She tried to avoid Benjamin's gaze, but there was no escaping the weight of his words. Her colleagues around her shifted uncomfortably, no longer pretending not to notice. But let me make something clear, Benjamin continued, his tone firm. There is no room in this company for discrimination, disrespect, or belittling anyone based on their abilities or background. Every person who walks through our doors deserves to be treated with respect and fairness. He paused, looking over the audience. To those of you who may feel afraid to speak up against such behavior, let this be a reminder. I am here to ensure that Brightview Solutions remains a place of integrity. And to those who think otherwise, I suggest you reconsider. David returned to the stage, nodding in agreement with Benjamin's words. He put a hand on Benjamin's shoulder. I fully support Benjamin in his vision for Brightview, and I trust that together we'll create a better future for this company. Turning to the HR team, David nodded curtly, then addressed Cheryl directly. Miss Dixon, he said, his voice laced with authority, please meet us in my office after this meeting. Cheryl's face went pale, and she nodded silently. Benjamin finished with a warm smile for the rest of the crowd. Thank you all. I look forward to working with each of you as we move toward a future we can all be proud of. The employees erupted into applause, energized and hopeful for the changes to come. As Benjamin left the stage, he caught Cheryl's terrified expression one last time, knowing she understood exactly what lay ahead. Cheryl's footsteps echoed down the hallway as she walked toward David's office, her hands clammy and her mind racing with excuses. Each step seemed heavier than the last, and by the time she reached the office, she was struggling to hold herself together. She knocked softly, and David's voice called her in. Inside, David sat at his desk, his expression stern but calm. Benjamin stood by the window, looking out at the city skyline. The tension in the room was thick, and Cheryl could feel the weight of their disappointment in her actions. David motioned for her to sit, but she hesitated, opting to stand. Clearing her throat, she spoke up first. I'm sorry if I did something wrong. I was just trying to do my job, she stammered, trying to find the right words. Benjamin turned from the window, his gaze sharp and focused on her. Cheryl, he began. Do you understand why you're here? Her eyes darted between the two men, and she finally looked down, unable to meet Benjamin's gaze. I was just trying to keep the standards of the company high, she muttered. We can't hire just anyone and— Enough, David interrupted. This has nothing to do with standards and everything to do with respect. You demean someone based on assumptions based on a person's appearance and ability. You didn't even give Larry Simmons a chance to prove himself. Cheryl's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She tried to defend herself, but each excuse fell flat, crumbling under the weight of her own actions. Benjamin watched her for a moment before speaking again. I came here today to see how my employees treat people, not just candidates, but any human being who walks through our doors, he said. What I saw was far from the values I expect in this company. You didn't just reject a candidate, Cheryl. You insulted someone, belittled them, and made them feel unwelcome based on assumptions you had no right to make. She fidgeted, her gaze darting back to Benjamin, but he held her eyes steadily. There was no anger in his expression, only disappointment. And for some reason, that stung her more than anything else. David folded his hands, his gaze softening slightly. Cheryl, I know you've been with us for a few years, but behavior like this goes against everything we stand for. We cannot and will not tolerate discrimination or bias in any form. After careful consideration, we've decided to terminate your employment with Brightview Solutions, effective immediately. Cheryl's face went pale as the words sank in. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked to Benjamin, hoping for a lifeline, but his expression remained unreadable. I'm sorry, Cheryl, Benjamin said. It's not about punishment. It's about ensuring that we uphold our values. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels they have a fair shot. That's the company I want to lead. Cheryl nodded, the fight gone from her eyes. She left the office quietly, the door clicking shut behind her. The room felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted. David looked at Benjamin and nodded approvingly. I think you did the right thing, Ben. Benjamin smiled, relieved to have his brother's support. Thank you, David. Now, we have work to do to rebuild and reinforce these values, starting with the team. For Benjamin, justice wasn't about punishing one person. It was about changing a culture. And in the end, Brightview Solutions became a place where everyone, regardless of who they were or where they came from, could belong. And this brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories. Have a nice day.